There's a kind of hug that stays with a man for a very long time, even if the two of you never meet again, not because it lasted too long, nor because you did anything particularly special, but because it came at the right moment, when emotions ran deep, the distance between you was close enough, and you were the only one sensitive enough to offer it without needing to say a word. What makes a man unable to forget a woman isn't her looks or what she says. It's the moment she makes him feel touched, not skin to skin, but on a deeper level. A hug that may seem gentle, light, even fleeting, yet if it makes him feel understood, trusted, and free to be himself, then, even months or years later, he'll still remember it. So the question is, do you know the kind of hug that leaves a mark on a man's heart, and the kind that just makes you a sweet girl like any other? Today, I'll share with you 6 kinds of hugs that men can't forget, not because of technique, but because they strike right at the core of their emotional instincts. And more importantly, I'll show you when a hug should speak for you. Ready? A hug is never just a hug. Some things aren't remembered with the mind, but are etched into us through feeling. A sentence might pass through your ears and be forgotten, but the look in someone's eyes when they said it can linger for years. A moment that seems so small, like when someone places a hand on your shoulder and leaves it there just a second longer than usual, can become a marker in memory. And sometimes, all it takes is a hug at the right time to leave something behind in a man's heart. Something that can't quite be named, but feels deeply real. People often think hugs are about affection. You hug when you're in love, when you care, when you're close. But in truth, hugging is one of the first instincts we're born with. When a baby cries, it seeks its mother's arms. When adults feel sadness, loneliness, or loss, they reach for each other in a hug, as if to say, "I'm here with you." It's not a language, but it speaks volumes in ways words never can, especially for men who often grow up in environments that teach them, don't be weak, don't show too much. A hug can become something rare and meaningful. They may not say much, but they feel. They might not show emotion openly, but they remember clearly how a hug made them feel. He might forget what you said on a date, but he'll remember the moment you rested your head on his chest without needing to explain. He'll remember the feeling when you didn't let go too soon, and even if he doesn't analyze it, he'll know that hug wasn't like the others. The right hug from the right person at the right moment can go straight into emotional memory, what science calls the subconscious. It stores feelings that don't need reasons. You don't have to say, "I like you." You don't have to admit, "I'm opening my heart." If your arms say it for you, genuine, quiet, and held just long enough, his heart will understand on its own. And the thing is, that heart will remember, silently, but for a very long time. So don't treat hugs like a routine, something to be done without thinking. They're not habits, they're chances. A chance to reach someone in a way that goes deeper than flirtation, softer than conversation, but stronger than anything superficial. It's the simplest tool for connection, but also the most overlooked. And if you know how to use it right, you won't have to say much. You don't have to be the most beautiful or perfect. You just have to be right, right for him, right in that moment, right in what you feel. Then, a hug won't just be a gesture, it'll be a memory. And you will live in that memory, even if the two of you no longer share the same space. But for a hug to truly make its way into a man's memory, you need to understand what it's saying, and when that message becomes unforgettable, because not every hug carries feeling, and not every hug is one he'll want to hold on to. The first kind of hug, touch and release. Have you ever hugged someone and felt like you were just completing a formality? An arm that brushes past in a hurry, shoulders that barely touch for a fleeting second, a few polite pats on the back, then a quick step away, like you were both reenacting an old script. It's the kind of hug that leaves behind no scent, no feeling, and of course, no impression, just enough to avoid seeming cold, but completely void of any real connection. In workplaces, casual social settings, or meetings where emotions haven't had time to grow, this kind of hug often shows up as a defense mechanism. It's polite and proper, but it quietly sends a message. There's still a certain distance between us. A man receiving this kind of hug won't feel offended, but he will clearly sense that you're drawing a line, gently, discreetly, but unmistakably. What's interesting is that men may not be the best at picking up details, but they're extremely sensitive to distance. Their bodies notice whether you're leaning in or pulling back, whether you're holding their hand because you want to, or just out of politeness. A rushed hug, like a jacket that touches your shoulders but doesn't keep you warm, doesn't hurt anyone, but it leaves something more lasting, a quiet certainty that you're not ready to open your heart. That said, this kind of hug isn't always a way of keeping someone out. Sometimes, it's simply how you protect yourself, maintaining distance until the right person, the right moment comes. In many cases, it's just the beginning, the phase where you're still watching, weighing things, waiting for a reason to give more. And if a man is perceptive, he won't feel disappointed. He'll be patient, because not every hug needs to be meaningful from the very first time. But if you keep offering that same kind of hug again and again, even when your heart has started to feel something, then it's no longer about staying safe. It's you locking yourself away. A hug can start as a gesture, but it shouldn't end as a routine. Just hold on a beat longer, or instead of a quick pat on the back, pause and give a gentle squeeze, and immediately he'll sense the difference. That small shift in the language of touch speaks louder than a dozen polite words. So if one day you realize you actually want this man to remember you after the encounter, let your hug be just a little different. It doesn't need to be intimate or dramatic, just more sincere than a mechanical back pat. Don't hug just to get it over with. Hug like you're considering opening the door, not stepping fully outside yet, but no longer keeping it locked. The second kind of hug, as friends, or maybe not. In the middle of a noisy crowd, sometimes there's a quiet space that belongs only to two people, a small gathering, soft music, low laughter, and in that atmosphere, you and he find yourselves standing a little closer than usual. You don't need to touch. You don't need to say anything different. But that space, the one that instinctively narrows between you, can't be faked. And when the party ends, you give him a hug, not rushed, not tight, but not indifferent either. This is the kind of hug where the body says what the mind is still hesitant to admit. It lasts just long enough to make him pause in thought, but not long enough to draw attention. You might not even realize it, but that in-between feeling is exactly what sparks the strongest curiosity in a man, because it sits somewhere between comfort and the possibility of more, like an emotional crossroads with no name yet. The man on the receiving end of this hug won't immediately understand what you're thinking, and that uncertainty is exactly what makes it memorable, because you didn't push him away, but you didn't pull him closer either. You didn't hold him for long, but you didn't let go right away. In those few short seconds, he starts to wonder, was she just being polite, or is she letting me come a little closer? Men don't need much to sense that a connection is forming. Just a slight shift in how you touch them, a bit more softness, an eye contact that lingers just a moment longer, or maybe the way you lean your shoulder into theirs instead of standing straight like always. These small details might seem trivial, but subconsciously, they trigger a kind of alert, a pleasant curiosity that makes them turn away, but keeps thinking of you. This kind of hug often appears during the balancing phase of a relationship, when things aren't deep yet, but no longer just casual. It's a quiet test, a soft invitation that doesn't need words. And sometimes, if you're subtle enough to add a look after letting go, or a slow smile, you're not just hugging, you're leaving a question mark in his mind. Of course, this type of hug doesn't always carry romantic intent. Sometimes you're just being natural, relaxed, not thinking much of it. But for men, especially those who are beginning to see you differently, this hug lingers longer than you'd expect, because they don't just remember the feeling, they get caught up in the unanswered question, what is she really thinking? And those countless possibilities suspended in the air, is what draws men in a world full of clear, cut answers. Sometimes it's the ambiguity that holds their attention the longest. The third kind of hug, lingering and slow to let go. There are touches that happen unintentionally, yet somehow make it hard for two people to pull away. You don't speak, he doesn't either, but suddenly there's a quiet space filled with emotion between you, and then you hug him, longer than usual, not because you need to, but because you want to. Some hugs aren't just gestures, they're like a brief pause in a life that's moving too fast, a moment where time seems to slow down, not because anyone tries to make it so, but because neither of you wants to walk away just yet. You didn't plan it. Your body simply chooses to stay a little longer. Your hand gently presses against his back, not tightly, not obviously, just enough for him to know you're truly there. And when you hold on for one extra breath, his heart is no longer on the outside of that moment. It gets drawn in, pulled into something it can't ignore. This kind of hug doesn't happen on a first meeting. It doesn't come from awkwardness or testing the waters. It only shows up when there's already a certain level of trust between you. No need for definitions, no need for labels. You hug him as if you're giving him permission to touch the most vulnerable part of you, without needing to say a word. And if he's listening with his heart, he'll understand exactly what that means. Because for men, a hug that doesn't rush to end is a powerful sign of presence and real feeling. It's nothing like the polite brush of formality. There's no calculation here. Everything happens as an honest reaction of the body. You want to hold on. You want to stay. And he senses that. Instinctively, your breathing slows. His heartbeat shifts. Maybe neither of you says a thing, but the silence itself becomes a thread, pulling your emotions closer. It's no longer just a hug. It becomes a punctuation mark in the noise of everyday life. A quiet space between two people touching something more real than any confession could offer. And if, in that moment, you gently rest your head on his shoulder, even for just a split second, you've left behind a very different kind of imprint. Not flashy, not seductive, but deeply real. That's when a man starts to remember you, not with his mind, but with his feelings. And once that kind of feeling takes hold, it doesn't fade easily. You don't have to be overly close. You don't have to say anything poetic. Just hold him a little longer. Squeeze gently as if you're holding on to a part of yourself. And in that moment, you've entered the emotional space that men rarely let others into. They may be strong, they may be resilient, but they're not unfeeling. They just need someone real enough to make them believe that. In that moment, they're allowed to be soft. And the thing is, this kind of hug can't be faked. It's not a technique. It's not a seduction strategy. If you don't truly feel something, you won't get the timing, the breath, the softness of connection just right. But if you trust him, if you feel safe and want to stay a little longer, your body will know what to do, and he will notice. Sometimes, a hug like that is all a man needs to know. You're not just showing up, you're thinking about staying. And sometimes, just one hug like that is enough for him to stop wanting anyone else. Why do men remember these hugs? Hugs like these, lingering, quiet, and slow to release, may not leave behind words, but they leave behind so much in the heart of the one being held. And in that moment, what stays with them isn't the arms around them, but the feeling. It's not as clear as words, not as loud as a public act, but it sinks in, bit by bit, gently but deeply. And because of that, when you leave, you might not even know you've left behind in him a memory he never saw coming. Some say men are indifferent, but that's not true. They just don't express themselves the way people expect. They don't go on about their feelings, don't ask endless questions, and sometimes they're so silent, it makes you think they don't care. But inside, there's a space where memory lives quietly, where every feeling that ever touched their heart is stored, not loud, not broken up, but lasting, deeper than you'd imagine. Men don't remember through words. They don't recall every sentence you said or every message you sent, but they remember through the body, through the way your hand softly pressed against their back, through the texture of your hair resting on their shoulder on a quiet day, through the way you held them a heartbeat longer than usual, then let go slowly, as if you weren't quite ready to part. Those things no one else sees, but in him they stay. A hug leaves a mark not because of what you said, but because your body spoke for you. The scent lingering on his shirt, the warmth of your arm, the soft exhale behind his neck. These don't go into conscious memory. They go straight into the emotional subconscious, where memories don't need to be analyzed to survive. The male mind, dry as it may be with words, is intensely responsive to feeling. Deep within the brain is a part called emotional memory. It doesn't store information through logic, but through how the body reacts, like how a random old song suddenly brings back a memory of someone you once loved. The right hug from the right person at the right time can trigger something inside him that's never been named. What he remembers isn't your looks or any skill you showed. It's the realness, the humanness, the unique feeling you left behind. It's the safety you made him feel, not because you protected him, but because he didn't have to protect himself around you. In a world where men are always told to be strong, your hug, if honest enough, is one of the rare places where they're allowed to be soft. And if a hug makes him remember, it's because you touched a part of him that words never could. You didn't just hug a man, you awakened something primal in him, raw, honest, and deeply felt. That's why some men, no matter how many other arms they pass through, still remember one old hug, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. Not because you were the most beautiful, but because in that moment, you were the only one who made him feel like he could be completely himself. The fourth kind of hug, leaning on his shoulder, saying nothing. When a hug stops being just a gesture and becomes a place to rest, that's when a man knows he's stepped into a moment he won't forget. Some hugs stay with men for a lifetime, not because they're grand or dramatic, but because they make him feel chosen, not by logic, but by something deep inside him. And among those hugs, there's one kind that never needs explanation, nor a deliberate lead-in. It happens in complete silence. When you lean into his shoulder, breathe softly, say nothing, and somehow that says everything. This kind of hug isn't an action, it's a letting go of all your defenses. You're not hugging to please anyone, not to maintain an image, not to suggest anything. You simply need a place to rest, and you choose him. In the moment you tilt your head onto his shoulder, the space between you almost disappears. Everything outside, sounds, lights, other people, fades away. For a man, that feeling awakens something deeply protective in him, not desire, not curiosity, but a primal instinct. I want to keep her safe. In that moment, you're not just an attractive woman, you become someone he feels needs protecting, and to a man, that feeling is sacred. What's special about this kind of hug is that it doesn't raise questions. Ambiguous hugs often leave men wondering, does she like me or not? But this hug gives them peace. It doesn't need interpreting, because everything is already there in how you allow yourself to soften in his arms. That silence becomes the strongest language of all. When you lean into someone's shoulder, it means you trust them not to let you fall. It means you've chosen them as your place to slow down. And for a man living in a world of noise, pressure, and responsibility, that small gesture carries immense weight. It makes him feel needed. And once a man feels he's the one you turn to in your vulnerable moments, he won't easily forget you. Sometimes, women think they need to do something grand to be remembered. But sometimes, what makes a man never forget is simply a soft, genuine lean of your head, because he might hug many people, but only a few will make him feel trustworthy enough to be leaned on without a word. The fifth kind of hug, silent together. There are times when a hug stops being an action and becomes a space. No laughter, no pats on the back to ease the moment, just silence. And two people holding each other like the rest of the world no longer matters. This is the kind of hug no one starts intentionally, and neither wants to end. It comes like a reflex, yet carries a deeply deliberate emotion, not meant as a goodbye, not meant to soothe, but to hold on to something that words can't describe. In that moment, all distance disappears, not because you lean into him, but because both of you are standing still, fully present in one another, minds, breath, heartbeats, as if a conversation has taken place without a single word. And strangely, the more silent it is, the more clearly the feeling comes through. Men are often taught that connection must be shown through action. Prove it, demonstrate it, do something concrete. But in this kind of hug, they don't have to do anything, just be there. And that very lack of effort, the unforced stillness, is when they feel the deepest bond with a woman, not because she spoke well or behaved perfectly, but because she knew how to simply be there without saying a thing. The silent hug is one of the rare things men never dare to forget, because it doesn't happen often. It's not like a fleeting crush or a moment of romance. It's the result of a quiet build-up of trust, of resonance, of knowing without needing to ask. And when you hug him like that, not rushed, not hiding anything, not trying to clarify anything, you're saying something huge, I understand, and I'm here. It's not dependence, it's not an invitation. It's a kind of deep understanding that makes a man feel seen, reached by a language he's spent his whole life looking for, because people can hug each other 1,000 times, but only when they can be silent together without feeling empty. That's when true connection happens. It's the kind of hug shared by people who don't need to talk to understand, don't need to hold tight to know how much they matter to one another. And when everything ends, when you step away from his arms without looking back, it's that very silence, that becomes the longest echo in his heart, not because of anything you said, but because you left behind a quiet space, real, still, and sincere, where he realized he can't forget. The sixth kind of hug, a silent invitation. At a certain point, a hug stops being just a connection. It becomes a choice, a subtle offer, not spoken, not forced, but clear enough for a man to understand. If you want to, I won't pull away. You wrap your arms around his neck, not too quickly, not too tightly, just enough to close the space between you. Your eyes look up, not avoiding. Your breath lightly brushes the space between your faces. In those few seconds, even without words, both of you know the line between us and something more is thinning, bit by bit. This kind of hug isn't seductive or impulsively passionate. It carries no demand, no control, but it's that calm, safe ease that makes a man pause. Because in a world where everyone guards themselves, the comfort you show now feels like an unspoken invitation. To a man who's emotionally aware, this moment doesn't just pass like other hugs. His chest tightens for a beat, his heart shifts, not because you're being seductive, but because you've just chosen him, not because you were aggressive, but because you didn't step back. And for a man who's been through enough casual embraces, that's a clear message. Of all people, she feels safe with me. And when you hold that hug just a little longer, not to cling, but as if to ask whether he's brave enough to step closer, you're creating a moment he'll remember for a long time. Not for your looks, not for any technique, but for the feeling of being trusted. A hug like this isn't for every situation. It needs mutual understanding, real emotion, and above all, a man mature enough to recognize it. But when it's the right person, the right time, you don't need tricks. Just don't step away. Just hold his gaze a heartbeat longer. Just offer the hug with a little openness, a little invitation, and a quiet sense of peace. That's enough to leave no doubt in his mind. You've chosen him. In Stoic philosophy, emotions aren't chased, but true ones aren't denied either. What's worth keeping is chosen deliberately and held with clarity. Just like this hug, it isn't driven by emotion blindly. It's intentional, thoughtful, and meaningful. Why? You don't give it hoping to get something back. You give it because you feel safe enough to allow yourself to be closer to a man with emotional depth. This isn't just an opportunity, it's a responsibility. When a woman doesn't guard herself around you, doesn't hide behind roles, but chooses to hug you with complete softness, you are now responsible for honoring that. Because hugs like these don't happen often, and they're not given to just anyone. Hugs say what words don't dare to. You can smile all evening, say I'm fine, say everything's okay, but if someone hugs you close enough, at the right moment, they'll know the truth. Because the body doesn't lie. When you're tired, your shoulders get heavier. When you're uneasy, your breathing falters. When you're lonely, you hold on to that hug just a little longer, even if you don't realize it. And if that man is perceptive, he won't need you to explain anything. He'll understand, not through logic, but through the raw instinct of someone who's felt something real before. A hug, given at the right moment, can say all the things words never had the courage to speak. This world is full of words used to hide things. I'm okay, I'm used to it, don't worry. But with just one genuine hug, all those masks can become transparent. Because a hug doesn't need to pick the right words. It can't be edited, it can't be copied and pasted. It's either real or it means nothing. And that's why, in a noisy, artificial world, a hug is one of the realest things you can give To a man, the right hug at the right time doesn't just show him your softness. It gives him a reason to stay. Because when you stop hiding, stop pretending, you open a space where both of you can be completely real. And that truth, no matter how fragile or trembling, will always be stronger than any beautiful words. Stoicism isn't about being cold or numb. Stoicism is about choosing to keep what's real and living it fully, without decoration. A hug is like that. It doesn't need to be much, just real and right. When you give it not to manipulate, not to please, but simply to say, I need someone to hold me right now. That's the most sincere invitation one human being can offer another. And if you give that hug at the right moment, not out of politeness, not out of habit, but because you truly want to keep that person close, then no matter how many people he meets afterward, he will remember, not because your hug was the most special, but because it was the only one that was true, when everything else was just performance. Final thoughts. Know when to let a hug speak for you. After all the hugs, whether light, silent, or deeply emotional, what stays with a man isn't the image, it's the feeling, and that feeling alone decides who you are in his mind. That's why you need to know when it's time to let a hug speak in your place. You don't need to be good with words. You don't have to know how to lead a conversation. Sometimes, all you need is to understand when to let your body say what your voice can't. With the right hug, at the right time, there are moments when words lose meaning. Maybe because the person listening isn't in the right state to hear them, or maybe because you don't even know how to phrase what you truly feel without diluting it. In those moments, instead of saying, I'm sad, I need you, or I miss you, you can simply move closer and hug, not to avoid speaking, but to touch something that words can't reach. A hug, if you truly understand its weight, isn't just a sign of affection, it's an unspoken message, a primal instinct for connection between people, between hearts, between the illusion of strength and a moment of honest vulnerability. So don't hug out of habit, hug as a conscious choice. Choose to hug when you sense the other person needs to know you're here, with no promises required. Choose to hug when what's in your heart can't be spoken without exposing your fragility. And most of all, choose to hug when your heart opens, even for just a brief, genuine moment. Men, no matter how good they are at holding things in, can't truly suppress their emotions when they receive the right kind of hug. It's not the kind of thing that makes them fall in love uncontrollably, but the kind that quietly makes them turn back, almost without realizing it. That hug might be the first time in a long while they feel like they don't have to keep pushing themselves to be strong. And sometimes, you may not even know that seemingly quiet, simple hug is enough to make a man turn back and look at you with completely different eyes. You're no longer just the girl he met a few times, no longer one of the many women he used to know. You become the one who touched something deep inside him, a place he always thought no one would ever be sensitive enough to reach. And with that kind of connection, a man doesn't forget, not because you tried to stand out, but because, in that very moment, you were simply yourself, unguarded, unfiltered. Stoic doesn't mean being cold or unfeeling. It means choosing to share your emotions at the right time, with the right person, and in the right way. Nothing more, nothing less. And a hug, when you're fully aware of what you're offering, becomes one of the most powerful choices you can make, even in silence. If you've ever given a hug that couldn't be forgotten, leave it in the comments. And if you want to become the kind of woman a man can never forget, you already know where to start. We've just taken a journey that didn't talk about love with poetic words, but through hugs, seemingly simple gestures that carry everything words fail to express. You've seen it now, whether it's a hug as light as a brush of presence, or as deep as a long-held breath. Each one is a signal, not just an act of affection, but a deliberate choice, filled with awareness, emotion, and genuine connection between two souls who understand each other without needing to speak. What makes a man remember is not how you look, not impulsive gestures. It's that one moment when you gave him a hug and he knew for sure, she understands me. And sometimes, it's the first time in a very long time someone has made him feel seen without needing him to explain. So what about you? Have you ever received a hug that left you speechless because it touched something deep inside? Or have you ever given a hug that someone still remembers? Share your story in the comments. And if you felt this message reached a part of you, hit like, share it to spread the message, and don't forget to subscribe. The next videos are waiting, so we can keep learning about the mind, connection, and how to love like truly grown, emotionally aware human beings.